One of the things that's most important to talk about with psychometric tests or any sort of assessment is really making sure that the kind of ethical legal guidelines are being followed. Because there's always a lot of discussion, and there has been especially recently, about how tests are used, what are the online usages like of tests, what data are people collecting, how are they using it, who's sharing it, who has access to it, and what's the purpose of testing. So with the HPTI and with good psychometric testing, it's really important to make sure that people are given informed consent about what data they're providing, about how their tests are being used. So for example, if you're using an assessment for selection to assess potential candidates for a job, it's really important to tell all of the candidates what data you're collecting, what you're testing them for, and why. Usually framing is important too, to explain how it's going to be used and what are the benefits of taking the test for them, whether or not they get the job. So oftentimes, especially if you're looking at testing senior leadership candidates within an organization, for example, you might want to offer development opportunities to people who both are successful in getting the job and people who don't get the job or the position. So it can be a really advantageous opportunity in that kind of sense to have the conversation with everyone about their results and to say what you were looking for, what the test was looking for, and what the decisions were made based on. And then you can use that along with the data and the information from the test and people's results to have a conversation about why they were or why they weren't successful, and potentially how they could be successful in other areas. So you may say, this trait, someone with this trait, like very low adjustment, is really going to struggle with the stress of the position that you were looking for. So there's two different opportunities you can use to talk about that. The first is to say, what's the best job fit based on the level of stress you can manage, you can handle at your work. But the second is to say, okay, well, if these are your stress levels, what are different coping strategies you can use to manage that stress at work? What kind of situations do you get into where you're finding it very difficult or very easy to manage your stress? What are the behaviors you use alongside that to manage the kind of outcomes of your stress? And when you can have those conversations and give people all of the information about what you're doing and why you're doing it, you can really use it to make employee development better across the board, and even sometimes to make things that could be relatively negative or seem negative to people. And it's really useful to be able to use that kind of honesty, that kind of openness about what data you're collecting, about how you're using the data, and about how you're using the tests to really make it a good experience for everyone involved. Because then they're going to be more likely to look for those development opportunities or to look at those stretch opportunities next time, even if it was an unsuccessful attempt one time, it was a positive experience overall that they got something out of. And so the same is true with the entire testing process from beginning to start, is making sure that people understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how their data is being used. And when companies get into trouble is when they're dishonest, or they provide misinformation, or they're not clear about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So it's really important with any psychometric testing, especially if you're using it for selection or development or retention, is to make sure that it's used really ethically, really honestly, and really clearly to make sure that both sides get the best.